Welcome traders. It is Monday, the 10th of April. So I'm producing this on Monday because it's been an Easter weekend, and so although the markets are sort of partially open, most of the world is really celebrating holidays today. Anyway, and so was I. So let's kick off by having a look at major news coming out this week. So really, from Wednesday, I'll be expecting major volatility around that US dollar. Really, just looking to see how the state of inflation is, and then moving on to Wednesday. So Wednesday, 7 p.m., we've got FOMC meeting minutes. So this will give a really good indication of how calm the Fed is, what their outlook is with regards to what is the current state of inflation and what is the outlook for the coming month. And then we have on Thursday, we'll have GDP out of the UK. So that'll be interesting. That'll kick off first thing in the morning. And then we'll have out of the US, we'll have, again, PPI data and unemployment. And really the sensitivity will be around the unemployment. So right now, for the most part, it is coping relatively well. It's not completely unreasonable to think that there will be, if the markets continue to struggle with inflation, and we are dealing potentially with some form of a recession. Things are different now. This is a new thing, that possibly we could see those unemployment numbers climb a little bit, but not in a desperate fashion, just that we could see them spike a little bit. Okay, and then we've got on Friday, we've got retail sales figures and consumer sentiment. So that's really going to finish off the week in terms of what's going on with the biggest currency in the world, and we'll see how that goes. Now, let's move on and have a look at the charts. So looking at the volatility index, no real increase in that at the moment. Nothing to be concerned about there. Let's move on and have a look at the US dollar index. So we can see that it has continued to creep down over the last week. It's come back up from a level of support. We could see that this produced a minor bit of a rejection candle there. So we could, if we see a break of the low of this, we could see a continuation to the downside. This could just be a straightforward move down towards that 100 level. Looking at it from a weekly perspective, it looks pretty much as though that's what's happening, but it is now in an area where it is going to decide if it's going to double bottom or simply continue through this, if it's going to find support or if it's going to continue to push through. Okay, one thing of interest to me is that the April candle has broken the low of the March candle. And we are still technically within a range. How do we know this? Because the last three candles are all roughly within that same price area. Okay, so therefore, it bouncing in this area is statistically more likely because it is range bound. So just something to think about. Having a look at the euro dollar, we can see Friday finished with a bit of a close to the downside. And we can see it's battling with resistance there at 1.09. So that's interesting. So that means that we're already in an area where potentially we could see euro dollar possibly head a little bit lower. It's also range bound. So any kind of a move this week to the downside would imply that the range is still intact and that we could just see price continue back down towards these lows. We're going to have to see how that ultimately plays out. Sterling as well, fallen back through this level of resistance, back down below that. This uptrend is still intact. So I'll be looking this week to see if we do get a bullish candle and if we do break the high and we attempt to continue upwards. But overall, that is not looking, especially it's a bit more obvious when you look at it on the weekly, it is struggling with this level. And considering the dollar is range bound, all of this implies that we could see the markets kind of rebound a little bit there and head lower. So especially here, you can see with the Australian dollar against the US dollar, it's sitting within a bull channel. We've just broken through the bottom of that bull channel, which implies we're going to head lower. If we look at it from a weekly perspective, just a lot of exhaustion along the top here, and we've sort of broken to the downside. So all of this implies momentum is more bearish than bullish on the Aussie dollar. Kiwi dollar has done something very similar, just a bit of a mess here on the weekly with the indecision candle here, failure to go any higher, starting to push near the lows there, and just looking at a little bit more bearish than bullish. So for me, my initial impression is that price will head down towards testing levels of support, and we'll see how well it copes, but it is leaning, it's certainly considering the idea of heading lower. Then looking at the dollar yen, interesting little bit of a double bottom here. I missed that, but actually technically that was pretty much a clear signal to the upside. I hate that. That's a hindsight setup. I acknowledge that, pity. And what else? We've got same sideways movement here. So if we break above this high, we could see potentially a continuation to the upside there. So dollar yen might be an interesting one for the week ahead to put onto the watch list. Dollar Swissy broken through this level, very much at this time a bit more of an inverse of the euro dollar. So again, I want to see if it encounters any resistance here and continues down, or if it starts to break up above these highs. That would instead imply, if it does break up above 0.92 and close above that, the implication is that it's likely to just go back up to the top of that channel. Dollar CAD, downtrend here, retracing back up into the moving averages. So what I'll be looking for this week is a potential bearish setup here to see if there's a continuation to the downside. So that could happen either today or tomorrow. I'll be looking for that. And again, you can see within the bigger picture, it's still range bound, but the drift is a little bit more to the upside there. Quickly have a look at the Russian ruble, just generally kind of very spotty overall. You can see this is a good sign of a good example of just general lack of liquidity. There's just nothing happening here. It's just generally very spiky, no clear direction. These are just day-to-day transactions. In other words, there's no real traders trading this. There's just whatever is happening, tourists exchanging money or money moving in and out of the country in whatever sense of it. I'm not implying that. I'm just saying that it's just normal transactions. There's nothing else really happening here. No speculation. EURUSD as well, battling here as parity, and you can see it just ping-ponging around here. So EURUSD not offering much. And when you look at it from a monthly perspective, you can see that it's just battling in that area. Overall, look at the angle of that 50, that 20, and that 10, just generally slowly but surely flowing to the downside. So I expect it to be under pressure and potentially push a little bit lower. Okay, so looking at, this is a great tool for those of you not familiar with it. I can create my own indices, and I can create that here. So I've created, for example, a Canadian one. So I'll do it from top to bottom. Let's go through and have a look at the euro. So this gives me a sense of the euro as it performs against, similar to the dollar index. And you can see here overall, especially if you look at it from a daily perspective, that euro is definitely pushing higher. So in other words, that means that the euro pairs are leaning bullish. Okay, we'll see what happens when they get into resistance in this area. But overall, they are creeping a little bit higher. Again, struggling with that resistance over here. Then let's go ahead and have a look at sterling. So let's go look at sterling. Sterling is also strengthening a bit. So we know the pound pairs are potentially pushing a little bit higher, but also in an area where they've struggled. I want to see them really start to close a little bit higher this week. Then we have the Aussie dollar index, the Aussie dollar here, also bouncing a little bit off support. Overall, it's been generally trending lower. In this area, it found support in this area here to 1850, came back up, produced a bearish candle. So I'm just going to create a little bit of a marker here and just put that in about this area here. So you can see found support, broke through, came back, bearish candle here. If we break the low of this, my expectation is to see that Australian dollar continue to weaken. And the only other one that I have that's worthwhile having a look at here is the Canadian dollar. And you can see that it's kind of, it's actually range bound in this area, broken to the upside and come back below that soft general trend line. And again, here you can see nothing really clear happening on the monthly. So wicks below, wicks above, no clear direction. So what does that tell me? It tells me that some of the euro pairs and pound pairs could offer opportunities to the upside this week. Aussie pairs could offer some opportunities to the downside. And yen pairs potentially to the upside, and CAD pairs are probably worth avoiding unless I look at a CAD pair against a very strong GBP or strong euro or weak Aussie dollar. All right. I'll go through the individual pairs now and see if there's anything of interest there. So the first one here is euro yen. So this has got a nice little bullish euro coming into an area of resistance, but also dollar yen pushing up a little bit higher. So they would then support the idea of this potentially moving to the upside. But I'd also like to see it break through that 145 level. Then we have got Euro CAD. I only mention this because price did pull back into a level, very crisp level of resistance, produced a bit of a bullish candle, another bullish candle here, and now it's struggling a bit. So what I'll be looking for is a bullish candle here. Again, if I get a double bottom, another signal to the upside, then I'll be looking to push it a little bit higher there. Just a comment on Euro Aussie as well. That bullish candle we looked at last week, broken through and immediately encountering, I've got hiccups, encountering resistance here. So we're going to have to see what happens with that. Similar behavior here for pound yen pushing through. So euro yen, pound yen for me, I think are going to be quite attractive. Aussie CAD pushing a little bit lower this week, and so that could continue down towards, let's just have a look if it's got 89.59 or if it's going to potentially come back down to test level support. And then other ones of interest, for example, would be these crosses here. So CAD yen, you can see how they're pushing a little bit higher here. All the yen pairs are pushing up a little bit, and Swissy yen for me is very attractive. So again, it's got a bit of resistance to encounter in this area, but there could be a really good continuation to the upside there. So I found that interesting. Just to quickly recap on currency pairs, appears as though we might have a bit of a stronger dollar in the shorter term, and also at the same time interesting that the yen pair is starting to push higher, which again is something that often seems to happen. There's a it seems to be a correlation between when the dollar is going to strengthen, that yen tends to move with that as well. All right, so let's move on to the other pairs. Okay, gold taking a big knock here. A little bit of, actually not so much, no real bearish divergence there, sorry. So it's possibly going to produce another bullish candle here in this area, which would be somewhere from where it is at 1986 down to 1950 in this area. There could be a potential buy opportunity. If you get a nice little bullish candle at this level of support, that would be great. There's no bearish divergence, but this is a very bearish engulfing candle, so that usually implies a knock back at least down to these levels, potentially a little bit further. So I'll be allowing for the possibility of that. Silver as well, you can see a really nice solid breakthrough of this level of resistance, and now stalling a bit. So any kind of a pullback to test this level of support would be great for trend continuations, ideally. Copper itself, bit of a mess. I'm going to pass on that. Nothing of real interest there. And you can see now, again, natural gas. I've spoken about this. It's really trying to turn around. There's a lot more green candles in this area. There's some bullish divergence. So there's a whole lot of signs that this is running out of steam. If you look here, you go from really big candles to these small candles here, and then a bit of a move down and just small candles. So that the selling momentum in the last 20 candles is not the same as the previous 10 or 15 candles. It's really just big moves and starting to slow right down now. So this looks to me getting ready to turn around this week. I'm going to see if it pushes higher and see how far it goes from that, and then from next week assess what the opportunities are there. And then moving on to crude oils. Crude oils gapped last week. That was quite aggressive, and they've just stayed where they are. So usually when you get a big move like this, it makes sense because the gapping up is quite a bit of energy that's gone into that, and then it's treads water because it's exhausted. It's got to rebuild that, gather that kind of energy, and that's exactly what's happened. Gaps up to the level of resistance and just treading water here. So any kind of it's possible there could be a correction to the downside, in other words, a retracement, and then a continuation back up. But it does look as though that sentiment is trying to push a little bit higher there. So that would be cool. Any kind of pullbacks could be, for me, possible moves to the upside. We'll see how that goes. Let's have a look at wheat. Wheat, I'm talking about how this is trying to turn around. I was talking about it here as well. A lot of bullish divergence here, and then it's produced this double bottom in this area. It's trying desperately to turn around, and then it just keeps going down. So there's definitely more selling than buying in this area, and then it just keeps trying to turn around and keeps failing. So expecting, we'll just see what happens with this one when it gets back to this level of support. Going on to coffee. So coffee is at already. This was a great example of where that bearishness turned bullish, and it actually, what happened in that case, that's a better place to put that level. Breakthrough, retest, and a continuation. Testing for that, then fell through it, and now breaking to the upside. It's all over the place. There's no clear trend at the moment for this. Very nice bullish weekly candle last week, and it's closed up near the highest. So that usually the case in that situation, that would imply that movement's going to continue to the upside. Sugar has been incredibly bullish, man. This has been something that I haven't traded, but I've traded a bit, but just not as, and it's been obvious. Again, it's one of those ones in hindsight, I don't know what the hell I've been doing, but I've missed these opportunities. So for sugar, I'm absolutely waiting for a pullback. I'd love to see a pullback into the 22 mark area. You could just see how it's taking off here on the weekly, and that monthly as well. It's really just kind of pushing its way back up. We've got another big level. It's going to approach around about that. Let's call it $25 area. So what could happen this week is that it continues to push up, hits these big, nice round numbers, and then has a bit of a correction. But any pullback here, I'm going to be looking for trend continuations. That might not even occur this week. It might only occur next week. Cotton also trying to push up a little bit higher here. Very messy compared to that. So sugar is a beautiful trend. Really good quality, ridiculously better quality to be looking at that in terms of compared to some of these other ones here. And cotton, a little bit messy here. It's trying to push up higher. Okay, moving on to the global indices. So big move up again. Also treading water here. You can see it going sideways. It's overdue for a bit of a move down, in my opinion. Even down as far as 33,000 at a continuation. But it could also very easily, in this case, consolidate and then be a breakout to the upside. That could happen with FOMC. There could be something that triggers that if there's going to be, if there's a concern about rate hikes, for example, what's the Fed going to do about stuff? Could very well be what it's waiting for. To get that, there's a nice little bearish line. We are above that 50-period moving average, which implies that the market is more bullish than bearish. So let's see how that plays out. The S&P as well, really highlighted this bullish setup. Was it during the week or last week? It must have been during the week. We could see broke high and came back down. So again, here this implies potentially price is going to come back down a little bit more. On that, Nasdaq as well, also bearish setup, a bullish setup here, coming back down to this level. So I'll be looking for bullish setups here at these levels in this area, looking for continuation to the upside. I'm just noting that there is a lower high here versus a higher high here, so that could imply that. But here the weekly looks really nice. And we are above the 50-period moving average. So I'm inclined to be looking for bullish setups this week first. There's not enough data here for me to switch to being heavily bearish not enough at this time. There could still be a nice move up or a bounce. I'll be leaning that way first, and then we'll see if it continues and finishes lower by the end of the week. Then I'll reassess that. Mini Russell, largely sideways. Okay, so not a lot, not offering any clarity there. The FTSE pushing high, so there we go. FTSE's nice and happy, pushing above that 50 or trying to get above the 50 period on the daily. It's above it on the weekly. That looks good. Okay, so far for most of that, when you look at it from a monthly perspective, that looks pretty good. We had this close above the highs, and we've got a bullish candle here. It looks as though there could be trend continuations to the upside there. DAX right up at resistance. I think it is worth mentioning this. I want to see if we can get through this, but based off the FTSE, we might very well get there. Look at that nice little monthly bullish candle, and actually all-time highs sit right up here. So this week, be interesting to me to see if we could break up and go up and test that this coming week. And it's doing a different thing to what's going on in the US. The ASX out of Australia, this one as well, a little bit of a pullback into these recent lows and then a continuation to the upside, to me, would make the most sense there. Nikkei is just a mess. It's still stuck within this general range, this orange zone. I want to see it break out of that to the upside. And again, I think, I said it last week, I'll say it again, I think that when we do break out to the upside one day, that will be that nice little additional confirmation that possibly globally the markets are sort of leaning more into returning to a bull trend. But until that time, we'll see. Okay, on to the individual equities. So there was a nice little bullish candle on Apple. No continuation. We've gapped down today. That's fine. We've got Amazon. Same thing. We've opened lower, so haven't broken the high yet. That'll be the case for most of these. So all that really tells me at this time, guys, is that we have a bit of a weekly retracement potentially back down into these levels of support before we continue. I'm not too concerned. We could end up with a double bottom here and a continuation in those cases. Okay, AT&T has come back up into its level. It struggles with that 20 area. We're going to see if it can push through. So it's coming back down at the moment. I'll be looking for a bullish candle in this area and a continuation. And I think we can get rid of this head and shoulders pattern here. That was pretty cool. It played out not the entire amount, but it certainly had some opportunity there. I tend to want to always obviously move, update, trailing stop loss and capturing profit as you go, and never, the market is a tiger. I don't ever want to assume that it is just going to be nice to me. It's always a given that conditions can change because it's going to be looking for any opportunity to bite you if it can. That's why we do the risk management. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So here we've got a nice little bullish candle here. We've pushed up a little bit higher, and look at how price here is stuck between the 50, the 20, and the 10. So when price is on top of the moving averages, it's a mishmash. Basically, it's in a consolidation area. It's trying to decide what to do next. So although that was a nice bullish hit up, and we have broken higher, and we had a nice bullish candle week before last, there has been no follow through, which means that this 40 area is going to be a bit of a problem here. We've got a bullish candle set up here. It should be wanting to push higher again, but let's just see how that goes. I'm a little bit more cautious this week. Last week I was relatively optimistic because we had a strong finish, but I want to continue to see that play out that way. And so we've got, this would be called a bear flag effectively, because you'd have high lows, high highs, which is an uptrend, but it's still stuck within a larger downtrend, and therefore if we break through this to the downside, we could continue to head lower. You can see on the monthly it is producing a slightly higher low. I really want to see a bullish candle here to support that. So for me this week, it's about, do we break the high or do we break the low? That would then start to clear the way or imply or give clarity on which way it's likely to go. Again, we've had a series of up moves on Tesco as well. Overall, it's been really nice and bullish. There's definite bearish divergence here. MACD is a bit sort of choppy and wobbly. I expect this to probably drop down low. We'll see if it can climb back up from that. Amex, this was a larger head and shoulders. I'm going to keep this up. I find this fascinating because if it is ultimately going to be the case, then we would expect this to continue down. And if it is, then there's a higher probability once it breaks that neckline, we could see it continue even further down from there. So for the moment, it hasn't broken outside of that. I would need to see it break above this right shoulder on the weekly. It's ping-ponging around. We could see there's resistance there. It could find some support. Let's see what happens with that. Again, watching that from a distance. Berkshire Hathaway, looking good, guys, looking good. Pushing up, really nice. This was a very nice setup, and again, I didn't take it. It was a hindsight setup, I think. Or at least, if it might not have been hindsight, sometimes I'll comment on stuff and then actually forget to place an order on it, which bugs me because it's a trade setup that I identified and then didn't actually take myself. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Here, okay, you can see here, there's definite resistance at 312. right at the high here. You can see it's battling with that. Want to see it push through, but then it's going to battle with this. My expectation, though, is to see this at least attempt to finish higher the coming week. Coca-Cola, same thing again. I'm looking for pullbacks and a continuation to the upside on Coca-Cola. BP, right in that orange zone, the danger zone, and I've got to see if it can manage to get through that. I won't really touch it until it's above it, or if it has a pullback, I need to give it time and see what's going to happen. ExxonMobil will be the same thing. You can see it's bullish here, nice little bullish candle here off a level of support. It should attempt to run up, but then it's got this whole area to deal with. And you can see the gapping. Where else have we seen that gapping? Obviously in crude oil, so we can see where that growth is coming from. General Motors, just a mess on the weekly, generally range bound, slightly sort of bull trend, and so it's now at the bottom end of the trend, and therefore it's possible it could try to work its way back up to the upside. Let's see if it succeeds in doing that this week. JP Morgan Chase, nice little bullish candles here, level of support. It's the same kind of thing. It's more bullish when it breaks these previous highs here, but it's not giving a lot of clarity. It's range bound, so it could start to head lower or higher on that. Adidas, very nice big move and consolidation here. So pullback and a continuation to the upside would make me very happy. So expecting that to possibly head lower before going higher. Meta, same thing. It's sort of just trickling to the upside. You can see it's starting to flatten out here. So at some point here, I'm going to be looking for this weekly to do a pullback back down to 200. I'm going to be looking for that. Will it happen this week? We'll see. Morgan Stanley, trying to find some support here. And excuse me. And also not looking super strong. Could even potentially, it's a bearish engulfing candle, could possibly head a little bit lower. It isn't just that it's a bearish engulfing candle, it's usually how many candles it engulfs, how does it close. There's a lot more sort of details to it than that. Here, for example, we've sort of got an equal high on the MACD. This is the NVIDIA. Nice little bullish candle here. Overall, doesn't look terrible. I've marked those. If we break higher, it'll take another move, at least up to these highs here. The weekly, of course, has produced a bit of an inside spinning candle. It's not really an inside, it's broken the high. But that could be looking forward to triggering just a retracement within the weekly uptrend at this time. Netflix as well, looking for this to produce a bullish candle and try to push higher. You could see it's trying to decide if it's going to do a lower high. So let me just mark that in, and if we break above it, my general expectation is that it's going to be bullish. I want to see though, I'll just put that up there, and I'll put that up there, and then I'm just going to quickly switch this up into a very nice soft little gentle mark thing, just to see if we could break through there. If we can, then we're not going to be forming a head and shoulders here. So 2023 is going to be unpredictable, folks. It is. It's different. I've not seen price action like this in the last 30 years. It appears to be very range bound. We have got new stuff that hasn't happened in the last 30 years. We're globally, make no mistake, we are in a cold war with Russia everywhere in the world. You're either pro-Russia or pro-democracy, pro-authoritarianism or pro-democracy. That's it. That's what's happening at the moment. And so we have that uncertainty. And it's global. It's not just between two countries. Everybody in Europe is a threat, and so that also implies the UK as well, and of course that implies China versus the US. So it's a global thing. We also have this inflation, which is a global issue. It's not just an American issue, it's a global issue. We have a lot of uncertainty. That's really what's going on. And so that uncertainty is reflected in the markets. Although there is a tendency to want to go back to being bullish, the markets are not able, there's just not enough momentum to pick that up right now. So just keep that in mind while we go through these things. PayPal, bullish candle here, but no follow through. I want to see it break through that line in the sand, and just look at the weekly here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8 candles sideways. Yep, not a lot happening there. Then we have Spotify, also very nice. It's a break through that area, pull back, bullish candle. I want to see us break and continue. But you can see the wicks starting to come in here on the weekly, starting to show a bit of exhaustion. So this week could be uncertain. That's the way I would see it. Whereas last week I was leaning more bullish, looking for the markets to go higher. Many of them did. This week there's very much mixed signals coming from it, which doesn't mean that it's going to continue to be that way, but it does mean that you can't tell. You can't tell what's more likely. You've got less implied action. When a market's generally bullish and not overextended, the implication is it's going to continue to be bullish. If it's very overextended and starts to show exhaustion, then the implication is it's going to go sideways or have a bit of a correction. Whereas now we've just got a lot of mixed signals. Some are bullish, some are overextended, some haven't gone anywhere. So it's just a complete mixed bag. Okay. FedEx, looking good. Nice little pullback into this area. Just a very nice breakout. For now, I think it is at a little bit of a level of resistance, but I would look to see there's a bit of a rejection there. I'd look to see it try to go a little bit higher. Tesla is starting to push lower. It's still in the danger zone. So this area here this area for me is still the danger zone. We break below that, we'll start to see price head lower. If we could break above this 230, then I expect it to continue higher, but it's struggling a bit with that. And finishing off with Vanguard, a pullback here to a nice bullish candle. The day isn't over yet, but most of these are pushing lower. So for most of the markets, they finished strong on Friday, but now they're not really following through just yet, but it is still early in the week and early in the day. All right, moving on to Treasuries and bonds. So here we could see a bit of a knockback, strong level of resistance. My expectation is to come back down to resistance, and then we'll see what it's going to do there. Eurobond as well. It is bullish, but it's also struggling a bit. You can see it's largely sideways. So there's a bit more push to the upside, but also just look at these wicks here, that strong exhaustion. There's not a lot of love above that. So not a lot of buyers. And so there's sort of buyers below here, but not above here as well. And then finishing off with cryptos. This is looking good. There's very strong bearish divergence there. So what it's trying to do is producing a series of higher lows. There's a definite level of resistance. Usually I'd be expecting it to break through that weekly, not looking good. That's the same thing. That's just a push, and now it's treading water. This is a pattern we've seen a lot today. In different markets, we've seen these big candles, and then on the daily, and we see it suddenly just producing sideways motion. It's waiting for something, and it's recouping energy. So could it go down from here? Absolutely, it could go down from here. If it breaks these lows, I'd expect it to go down. There's strong bearish divergence, which usually implies it will fail if it tries to break out. There's just not enough buying momentum here. It'll do it. The only way where that isn't the case is if the market goes sideways and then this starts to level out and starts to trend upwards, and then that implies bullish momentum is coming from it. But right now, the sentiment is bearish, and it implies it's going to fail if it tries to break out. So we'll see. That's usually the case. Ethereum did manage to break out, pullback, bit of a bullish candle here. I mark that, and the sentiment here is neutral. That's overall, that's a better sign for Ethereum than it is for Bitcoin. More bullish than anything else. Then you look at Solana. Solana looks as though this is setting up for a bearish breakout pattern over here. Okay, so it looks as though it's going to do that. It's very flat here, but this implies that possibly it's going to break to the downside. I find that interesting. So I'm just going to mark it over here and see if that is something that ultimately happens. Do I have a question mark here? Let's just go and see. I'll just do that if that's going to happen. Let's go through and have a look at Cardano. Cardano is pushing its way up, slowly but surely. Not a lot there. Just going to have to see that it can continue that. And Binance is also looking. It's going to be testing this level of support. We'll see what's going. So cryptos, mixed bag, ladies and gents, a mixed bag of those. Some are looking a little bit more bullish, some are looking sideways, and some looking a little bit bearish. And that's it. So summing up for this week, there are very much mixed signals there. There are hints that there's going to be a slightly stronger dollar. If that is the case, we could also see some of the indices push down a little bit. Interesting to see the UK and European indices and not the US indices looking somewhat bullish. Then we look at individual shares. We get mixed picture there. We look at bonds. They're battling a bit with resistance. They appear as though they're going to go sideways. We look at cryptos. Ethereum is bullish. Everything else looks a bit mixed or bearish. And that's it. So my recommendation is definitely some caution, sensibility, trade. Have a plan. Have a plan that takes care of the risk either way, whether it goes in our favor or not. And that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, have a fantastic week. I will chat to you next week.